Canelo's loss has implications on the top of the pound-for-pound rankings. One of the things that's become fashionable that I can't stand when it comes to boxing fans, publications, journalists is an overcorrection when a fighter loses. An overcorrection. So when a fighter's number one, he loses a fight, all of a sudden he drops, in some cases, all the way out of the top 10 pound-for-pound or lower. And it works that way with divisional rankings as well. But when it comes to Canelo and the other top 5 fighters who are universally recognized as top 5, guys like Crawford, Usyk, Inoue, Errol Spence Jr., we're really comparing apples to oranges because we're comparing a full-time fighter to part-time fighters. And there's a chronic inactivity problem in boxing. There's a pandemic of part-time fighters. There's a pandemic of fighters working 8 weeks per year now. When we look at Canelo, Canelo has built up so much equity, and the reason he took the pound-for-pound kingdom by force really is he was active while these other guys were sleeping. If we look at Canelo, Canelo has lost. There's no precedent for a fighter losing and staying at the top of the pound-for-pound rankings. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. I'm not saying Canelo is still the pound-for-pound king, but what I am saying is his loss has created a vacuum at the top. 2 through 10 has been volatile when it comes to pound-for-pound, but number 1 was solid because Canelo was putting in the work. He was achieving things while these other guys were mostly inactive. But since Canelo has lost, there's now a vacuum to fill that none of these guys are deserving of, in my opinion. When we look at Crawford, Crawford fought once in 2021, doesn't have a fight scheduled yet, and we're 5 months into 2022. Errol Spence Jr. didn't fight at all in 2020, has fought once in 2021, doesn't have a fight scheduled yet. Alexander Usyk fought once in 2021. He's scheduled to fight once in 2022. We'll see what happens with that. Inoue fought twice in 2021, but his level of competition dropped. Now, here's the good news for these fighters. All of these fighters have an opportunity in 2022 to grab that pound-for-pound spot. But in my opinion, right now, they're all one fight away, and that's due to the inactivity. Inoue will have his first shot. If Inoue beats Donaire and unifies at 118, he has a case at that point. If Errol Spence Jr. and Terrence Crawford fight each other, then that's the biggest fight that can be made in boxing right now as far as the sport goes. It's not only for 147 supremacy, it's for undisputed, and it would be for pound-for-pound supremacy, in my opinion. The winner of that fight would have the biggest claim at that point for pound-for-pound kingdom supremacy. And Usyk had the best win of 2021, and if he beats Anthony Joshua again, it would be one of the best wins of 2022, and he would then have a strong case. So all these guys would have a case in their next fight, but they're not there yet, and that's due to inactivity. All these fighters are like Memphis Bleek, one hit away right now. They're all one hit away, in my opinion. So right now, Canelo's loss created a void at the top, and none of these guys have been active and impressive enough to fill that void. It's just tougher, and I'll give you a stat here. Canelo Alvarez fought 4 times in 2021 and 2022 so far. The other 4 fighters I mentioned fought a total of 5 fights. So just to give you perspective, Canelo by himself almost fought as many times as those 4 fighters in the past 2 calendar years by himself. It's a troubling stat. And if you look, like I said, if you look at the expanded pound-for-pound rankings, and BoxRec's the only one that gives you that. I'm not a fan of BoxRec's pound-for-pound rankings because they're too rigid, but they're the only ones that give us an expanded outlook, which I like because it gives you a good look at the activity level and the chronic inactivity in boxing today. And it is a pandemic. And it gets worse as you go up the rankings because these fighters feel like once they get to a certain level and they're making this money, there's no need for them to show their face twice a year. But it's tough for me to give the pound for pound kingdom, hand the pound for pound keys to the pound for pound kingdom to a fighter who has fought once in the past 16 months. It's just not good enough for me. It's not acceptable. In no other sport is that acceptable. Look at other individual sports, golf, tennis. These guys have to be, these gentlemen and ladies have to be active. They have to give you a certain amount of activity. It's built into the rankings. NASCAR, it's built into the rankings. They have to show their face a certain amount of times during the year in order to stay on the rankings. Boxing doesn't have that, unfortunately, because we each have our own individual rankings. There's no central governing body in boxing. And the journalists, unfortunately, the commentators, unfortunately, don't hold the feet of these fighters to the fire when it comes to activity. So I think it's troubling when we're crowning fighters who are fighting once a year. We're crowning part-time fighters. To me, working 8 weeks per year is unacceptable. It's just unacceptable. You got to give me more than that. You got to give me more than that. So as a fan, right now, it's subjective. We all have our own pound for pound rankings, but mine, I can't reward part-time fighters with the pound for pound keys. I can't have a part-time fighter #1 pound for pound. I just can't. And it's just me. I'm not acting like I have a big voice, but it's my one little shot in my war against inactive fighters. I'd like to see fighters, first and foremost, more active. And the only way we're going to get that is if we stop rewarding fighters who are inactive with achievements, with legacy. It's just not good enough for me. Get more active. But the good news is all these fighters are going to have a chance before the year ends to stake their claim. We'll see what they do with it.